Hi, I'm Stephanie Gosk, and you're watching NBC News Signal. Millions of Americans currently live with some kind of implantable device in their bodies, and they trust them to be rigorously tested and closely monitored. And patients should expect their doctors to disclose any and all information about the devices and any financial ties they may have with the multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies that make them. But as the NBC News Investigative Unit dug into this, we found this is not always the case. The unit recently teamed up with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists to examine just how these devices are tested, approved, and used. So what happens when the devices fail? We're going to take a look at it from all sides. Breast augmentation is the #1 cosmetic surgical procedure, with over 300,000 women going under the knife in 2017 alone. But as we've uncovered, certain implants could be linked to a deadly cancer that, while rare, is more common than doctors and patients realize. Here's NBC's Katie Beck.
For 3 excruciating years, mother of 2 Michelle Forney suffered from painful swelling around her breasts and constant fatigue.
I probably went to the doctor 6 times. Nothing was working.
She suspected the breast implants she'd gotten 20 years ago, but her mammograms came back normal. She had the implants removed anyway, and the news came as a shock.
My scar capsule around my breast implants was full of disease, full of tumors. That's the ALCL.
Forney was diagnosed with a cancer of the immune system linked to breast implants called ALCL, only first identified by the FDA in 2011. Now, new fears. It's an emerging risk.
Did you think to yourself, this could be cancer?
Never. My plastic surgeon didn't bring it up to me. My OBGYN never spoke to me. Nobody.
The FDA now has 414 reported cases of ALCL and believe it has caused at least 9 deaths. They have considered it rare, with odds as low as 1 in 30,000 women at risk. But an NBC News investigation with the ICIJ found data from other countries suggesting the risk could be as high as 1 in 10,000 or even 1 in 1,000, though some countries may use different types of implants. The main concern is with textured implants, said to remain more firmly in place than smooth, though they can carry a risk too.
I think it's an emerging crisis.
Plastic surgeon Eric Swanson, researcher and author of 2 textbooks on cosmetic surgery, believes this latest evidence shows textured implants are dangerous and should be banned.
If you've got an alternative that's completely safe, why on earth would you recommend that device?
Michelle never even knew she had textured implants until they were removed. One implant manufacturer, Allergan, tells NBC News the safety is supported by a large number of peer-reviewed and published studies. Another maker, Mentor, saying this cancer is very rare and it fully supports ongoing research to further scientific evidence. Michelle now on a mission to warn others, thousands joining her Facebook group for more information.
There's not enough medical doctors that are familiar with this.
The French government is now urging surgeons to stop using textured implants. The FDA told NBC News it will meet next year to discuss concerns about their safety.
When it comes to breast implant-associated cancer, it's not an issue of choosing saline versus silicone. To reduce your risk of this cancer, avoid textured implants and choose the smooth type. In our next story, we're talking about arrangements medical professionals don't always disclose to their patients, the one between doctors and Big Pharma. A 2017 study found that roughly half of U.S. doctors receive payments from pharmaceutical and medical device companies. Here's one story on how these payments might affect patient care. In 2016, Wendy Connect got the news every woman fears. She tested positive for the breast cancer gene.
I felt like if I had it, I would eliminate my risk as much as possible.
That meant a double mastectomy, followed by breast reconstruction. She turned to plastic surgeon Dr. Max Leffeld. But almost immediately after the surgery, Connect grew worried.
I was in excruciating pain. I kind of felt something was wrong.
What she didn't know was that the critical support device that Dr. Leffeld used for the reconstruction, something called the Siri scaffold, had failed.
Apparently, all the seri had just dispersed inside my body.
Wendy has now had a total of 6 procedures. The nerve damage so bad she may never be pain-free. The series scaffold used in her first surgery was made by medical device manufacturer Allergan. It is FDA approved, but not specifically for breast reconstruction.
I was shocked, and I thought, well, obviously I should have been told.
Connect says she wasn't told, and she thinks money may be to blame. Dr. Leffeld is a paid consultant and researcher for Allergan, the makers of the series scaffold. He also owns stock in the company. By the time Connect was treated in 2016, Dr. Leffeld had earned nearly $470,000 from the company doing consulting and research, something she says she only later learned online.
In one way, it made me feel like, oh, that's why this happened. Maybe the doctor was being paid to use this.
Do you think the money tainted this doctor's medical judgment?
In my opinion, yes.
It was FDA cleared.
By law, Dr. Leffeld is not required to disclose his financial ties directly to the patient during treatment. No doctor is. Physicians only have to report the money to the federal government. The information is publicly accessible, but consumer watchdogs say patients don't check.
Patients are harmed when doctors have a pecuniary interest in the medical devices or drugs that they're prescribing and recommending to patients.
Dr. Leffeld declined NBC's request for an interview, but on his website assures patients that any financial affiliations he has will have no bearing on his clinical recommendations. But research shows doctors receiving even a free meal can influence what brand-name drugs they prescribe. And you should know, doctors have to report these payments to the government, which then makes them publicly available online. Okay, now on to our next story. There is a growing demand for a device that controls pain, a possible replacement for highly addictive opioids. It's called a spinal cord stimulator. But are they safe? And have they been sufficiently tested? Here's what we found out. A career as a Hollywood stuntman left Pete Corby with debilitating chronic pain.
I had to keep a flask of Jack Daniels and a packet of Oxy to keep me going.
But today, Corby can tend to his horses, thanks to a surgical device called a spinal cord stimulator.
It saved my life. Literally saved my life.
The device is surgically implanted under the skin and sends a mild electrical current to the spinal cord to relieve chronic pain. Spinal cord stimulators are being touted by the medical device industry as a safe, non-opioid option for certain patients.
They just kept pushing it, you know what I mean?
Jim Taft had high hopes when he met representatives from a company that manufactures the device at a doctor's visit.
You're going to see a dramatic decrease in your pain medicine. And I was like, that's great.
But it didn't work out that way, he says.
It was the sensation of being electrocuted. It was very painful.
And he says it left him worse off than before.
I walked with a cane before this. I was able to go do things. And now I'm stuck in a bed.
An NBC News investigation in partnership with the Associated Press found more than 80,000 spinal cord stimulator injury reports filed with the FDA over the last decade, the third highest of any medical device category on the market. The reports include device malfunctions, shocks, infections, and in rare cases, paralysis. Advocates say the approval process for devices should be much more rigorous.
I think most Americans assume if FDA approves it, it's proven to work.
But that's not always the case.
It is not always the case, and too often with medical devices, we don't know whether it works or not.
The FDA says injury reports are not a reliable source of data, and conclusions about a device's safety or role in an adverse event cannot be drawn from the data alone. And that spinal cord stimulators go through the most rigorous device approval process. In terms of human testing, FDA approval for Jim Taft's device was based on one new clinical study in which 26 patients had the device implanted. It also included a review of existing studies involving nearly 1,000 patients with similar devices.
There isn't much really good information in the medical literature to tell us which patients in particular the device is likely to be helpful in.
Boston Scientific manufactured Taft's device and told NBC News the technology has been used for over 40 years and has helped hundreds of thousands of people. According to its internal quality assessments, over 95% of the injury reports were temporary or reversible. But that is cold comfort for Jim Taft.
Had I known what I know now about it, I wouldn't have one put in.
Every year, Americans undergo hundreds of thousands of surgeries, such as hip implants. But does the system that regulates those devices put patients at risk? We took a look at one type that's causing a world of pain for some patients. Olympic gymnast Mary Lou Retton was once one of America's greatest athletes, but the sport left her needing a hip replacement. At 37, she became the face of a new metal-on-metal implant called the Biomet M2A.
And thanks to Biomet, I'm not living with pain anymore.
Now, Retton is among 2,000 patients that have filed suit against the company. She alleges the implant caused her physical harm, and the company knew it was defective. Very similar to what Andrew Chappell, a young father of 4, says he experienced.
It was just so frustrating. It made me so angry.
His doctor discovered severe damage to his bones and metal from the implant in his blood at a level 100 times higher than normal.
It's been linked to stuff like heart problems and neurological problems, so I was very scared.
What Chappell didn't know is that well before he found out the device was causing harm, Biomet quietly discontinued it without informing U.S. patients. Then in 2015 and 2016, 7 countries issued safety warnings about the M2A. But that's not what the FDA did here in the U.S. The FDA says 2 months before Chappell's surgery, it issued a safety communication about the metal-on-metal category of hip implant. But unlike those other countries, it never issued a warning about the specific Biomet device. Jack Mitchell previously oversaw special investigations for the FDA and now is a director at the National Center for Health Research. He's critical of how many medical devices, including the Biomet M2A, are cleared by the FDA.
I think for the average patient, they think if there's an FDA seal of approval on a drug or a medical device, then that means it's perfectly safe under any and all circumstances, and that's simply not true.
An NBC analysis found at least 5 devices where other countries issued safety warnings, but the FDA never did the same, including a knee implant with a high failure rate and a pregnancy test that gave false results. A key difference? How countries monitor device safety. The FDA has what's called an adverse event database, where manufacturers, doctors, and patients can report injuries. But critics say the system is too slow.
And it sometimes takes them months, if not years, to discern that there is a major problem that requires action.
But other countries are more proactive, like Australia, which keeps special registries to track the outcome of 100% of joint implants, including hips. Experts say that kind of system allows regulators to spot problems more quickly and immediately get the word to doctors and patients.
What might be allowed or approved in Europe or recalled is not necessarily the same as what FDA will do, and there could be legitimate reasons for that. But I think we have to get these adverse event systems uniform enough that when there is a pattern that our FDA can take action.
Biomet did not respond to questions, but said in a statement, "We adhere to strict regulatory standards and work closely with the FDA and all applicable regulatory agencies in each of our regions." This year, Chappell underwent 2 complex surgeries to remove the Biomet hips and repair the damage. He has filed a lawsuit against the company alleging that his injuries could have been avoided.
And I could have gotten them out sooner, and that would have saved me 3 years of pain and suffering.
About 400 lawsuits remain pending against Biomet regarding the M2A hip, including Chappell's, as well as its former spokeswoman, Mary Lou Retton. Retton declined to comment for this story. Now, what happens to U.S.-made devices that don't pass muster here at home? Some are allowed to be sold overseas, and it's all legal. Here's NBC's Katie Beck with how exporting these devices is causing pain abroad.
Wolfgang Nezpor was thrilled to find a state-of-the-art solution to his failing shoulder.
I thought I was really going to get something out of it.
He had surgery in Australia, where he lives, to replace a damaged shoulder joint with a new one made of carbon fiber. 2 months later, the 36-year-old's condition had gone from bad to worse.
It was a stupid amount of pain.
His doctor eventually removed the device and found it had cracked.
Underneath in the bone there was black powdery fragments, which is obviously the disintegrating carbon from the pyrotitan implant.
Nezper's shoulder joint, called the Pyrotitan, is made in New Jersey by Integra Life Sciences. While it is made in the USA, the FDA won't allow it to be sold here. It's classified as export only, meaning it can be sold only in foreign countries, a practice questioned by consumer health experts.
Why should any medical device that isn't good enough, approvable enough in this country to be sold to other people in other countries?
The Pyrotitan is one of about 4,600 medical devices with the designation, which some device makers say can be registered faster, for less money, and with less oversight. Export-only products are just part of the $41 billion industry of U.S. medical devices sold overseas.
And the device industry is growing.
An NBC News investigation found more than a dozen export-only devices with concerning records. But the FDA says it does not have the authority to take action on export-only devices marketed in other countries, simply because they do not meet the agency's requirements for marketing in the United States. Australian authorities ordered a recall in 2016, and 19 patients needed to have the Pyrotitan removed. The device never lost FDA approval for sale outside the U.S. The maker says today the Pyrotitan meets all the regulatory safety and performance requirements. Meanwhile, Nezper says the ordeal forced him to have a complete shoulder replacement, a tough prescription to swallow for the father of 6.
You sit here and mull over it, you can't do the things that you want to do.
He trusted an American product and assumed its safety had U.S. approval.
That story about expert-only devices is part of a global project that involved more than 250 reporters in 36 countries. And while we were reporting on this series, the FDA announced its first overhaul in 40 years on the standards for approving medical devices. It plans to revamp both the clearance process and the way it monitors safety after a device hits the market. And that's it for us. I'm Stephanie Gosk, and thanks for watching Signal.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.